One important topic as we get into how this all works is the topic of vSphere namespaces. So if you're familiar with Kubernetes, Kubernetes provides this construct of a namespace that allows for resource isolation, right? And so it can use things to provide like quotas for how much capacity that a pod can utilize on the host, and you know what it provides a security boundary mostly around that host level, because in containerized environments you've got several different containers that get orchestrated onto a common host, and you may want to have some security isolation as well about what the relevant containers are able to access on that host. And so namespaces in Kubernetes provide, you know, that type of isolation. And so it would make sense, right, that as we do things like enable the supervisor cluster, which installs the spherelet on the ESXi hosts, which enable ESX and vSphere to really natively understand Kubernetes constructs, that you know, that these constructs of namespaces also apply, but at this deeper layer integrated with vSphere itself, and that allows for some very powerful constructs for workload management, which we'll explore over the next couple slides. Okay, so each namespace has its own resource pool. Right, so you have the resource isolation quotas, and so we can see an example of this on the screen here, where we have things like CPU, memory, storage policies, configurable through the familiar vSphere client interface. And so we see here, since we have Kubernetes in the hypervisor layer, and we can create things like TKG clusters that are provisioned on top of that layer, you can provision all of these assets that are provisionable through the supervisor cluster into a namespace. You can allocate for a particular tenant one of these namespaces with an associated security and resource allocations that provide boundaries for what the tenant is the amount of capacity the tenant is able to use. So, and here's an example of utilizing namespaces as a boundary for applications. And again, so generally modern applications are made up of a series of multiple distributed microservices, and oftentimes can consist again of serverless functions, of Kubernetes applications, of virtual machines, and this methodology that's vSphere 7 is capable of providing all those resources into a namespace is a powerful methodology for managing application resources, application consumption, security boundaries. Here we see a final build out of the previous architectural diagrams we've been working on to show some examples of what this looks like with applications running on top. And so again, supervisor cluster, think of it, it's just like an ESXi cluster, enabling an additional suite of services. Workloads will run. You can request things like, I need a Tanzu Kubernetes cluster, and the TKG service will work with OVA images that are prepared with the Kubernetes required software for running a Kubernetes cluster, right? And it'll orchestrate and automate the deployment of the Kubernetes cluster, and provide the methodology. The architecture is prepared, and the services are prepared to extend the login information and authentication services to the requester of that Kubernetes cluster.